Hey, good afternoon, welcome to Focus Physio, our live video once again. Today we're going to talk about why do I keep getting injured, right? Now, three factors, as you might have seen in our blog that we posted not too long ago. Three factors we talk about that explain a little bit more on why we potentially are more susceptible to injury, or so three predictors of injury, right? Number one being previous injury, number two being training load, number three being asymmetries in our body. Alright, so for this video I'm just going to talk about two factors first, being previous injury and training load, and next week we're going to talk about asymmetries and how that can affect how we perform, how we move, which potentially might lead us being more susceptible to previous injury as well, or more susceptible to injury. Alright, so the first point that would sort of predict or make us more susceptible to injury is previous injury. So the statistics have shown that if you've had an injury before, you're just a little bit more likely to have an injury at a slightly later time. Alright, when you have an injury, if your injury hasn't been corrected properly, hasn't been rehabbed properly, you're a little bit more susceptible to having an injury at that particular spot. Going forward and extrapolating that, if the injury has not been worked adequately or appropriately, it can lead to further compensations either above and below the injury site, or even expanding further higher up the chain. For example, if you've got an injury in your ankle and that hasn't been rehabbed properly, you're still having a niggling pain when you're running, walking up steps, you try and make adjustments or compensations when you go for a run, when you walk upstairs, downstairs, that potentially in the long run it compounds, and that can lead to compensations in your hips, pelvis, spine, even into the shoulder as well, when you're having to reach for certain things, just having to work around an injury site. Alright, so number one predictor of injury is going to be previous injury. Alright, and that's something that statistics have shown time and time again. Now the second predictor of injury is training load, or what we call load progression. A lot of the times, once we have an injury, we want to go back to how it was before we had an injury. So say, for example, we were running 10Ks before our injury, we rolled our ankle, we were out for 4 to 6 weeks. Once we are feeling pretty good, you want to go back up to running 10Ks again. The body's not able to handle that load. The tissues and the muscles cannot handle that capacity just yet. Ramping up straight 10K is going to be a big jump for the body as well. Alright, so all these sudden ramps in treatments, or sudden ramps in training structure, training load, and training capacity as well. Now, a lot of times what we see in our clinic the last few weeks, especially in this winter sports season, is what we see a lot of females who are involved in jumping sports, so namely netball and basketball. Alright, so we see a lot of our clients who have come in, they participate in both sports, netball and basketball, which requires a lot of load, a lot of impact to the knees and through the feet and through the shins. Now they're growing at the stage as well, so the body's changing hormonally, but then as well with all the rep stuff, with basketball and netball training, they've got training 5 to 6 days a week, at least 4 hours each time as well. It's a sudden increase for the body to handle that kind of load, which the body's not prepared to. Alright, compounding that with playing potentially a volleyball, which is a summer sport in high school, you've got training all year round, so you've got netball, rep netball and basketball during the winter. Without having a break, it merges into the summer sport volleyball during the pre-season. And you've got training all year round, which the body cannot adapt or cannot tolerate that kind of load as well. Alright, so a lot of times that's what we see especially in terms of say when the rep season comes, you're playing club level, you want to ramp up, going to rep season, training intensifies, training frequency increases as well. That's a huge sudden load. Or for example, in terms of swimming, doing the laps over summer, but once competition comes in, increasing the laps, increasing duration of training time by an hour, 2 hours sometimes. That's going to put a lot of stresses on the shoulder without having appropriate incremental increases of the training load. Alright, so this is the second point that we talk about. That's a predictor of injury. If you don't have a adequate structure or training progression plan in place, that's where the coaches come in to guide you through that, and that's where we come in as well to guide you through the progressions mobility work, motor control work, and stuff that we need to look at before we clear you for sport as well. And there's a whole screening and testing that you can do to monitor your training load as well before we return to play. Alright, so once again, it's a recap for these two predictors of injury. Number one being previous injury, number two being training load. Next we're going to talk about how asymmetries in the body can affect how we move, potentially leading us to injury as well. I'll see you next week.